US Treasury and Executive Director at Foundation of Defence and Democracies, Jonathan Schanzer. Jonathan, thank you for your time with us. So the US President has met with King Abdullah of Jordan. Can you take us through what they discussed?
Well, it doesn't sound like they discussed a whole lot. It was a very short meeting, as I understand it. But of course, the relationship between Jordan and the United States is rather deep. The Jordanians have they've all long enjoyed very positive relationships with successive presidents. And certainly the king met Donald Trump during the last go around for Trump here in Washington. I do think that there's some unfinished business for Donald Trump. The Jordanians did not join the working groups of the Abraham Accords, those peace agreements signed in 2020. The Jordanians have a peace agreement with Israel, but yet refused to engage in these working groups of what was known as the Negev Summit. I have to imagine that did not sit well with the president, but probably more than anything right now, it has been Jordan's pushback against Donald Trump's plan for the removal of Gazans from the Gaza Strip in order to rebuild that area. The Jordanians have really dug in their heels. They refuse this. A lot of that has to do with the fact that Jordan is something like 85% Palestinian, people of Palestinian origin. This is not sitting well with the king's population, so he had to push back. But that, of course, will not play well in the Oval Office.
Yes, and we also understand that Queen Rania, King Abdullah's wife, is also a strong advocate for the Palestinian population. She's very, very vocal on the topic. So 9 o'clock on Saturday, 9 o'clock at night, is the deadline for the hostages to be released. What do you believe will actually occur if they're not released?
Well, I think, number one, we already know the Israelis are going to mobilize, and what they will do is they will retake what's known as the Netzarim corridor. This is a military corridor that the Israelis built that runs east-west across the Gaza Strip, cuts it into basically two-thirds and one-third. The northern one-third is a big sort of a clean area that the Israelis had removed Hamas from this territory, and they will do so again while continuing to fight Hamas in the southern two-thirds below the Netzarim corridor. I think that if they're able to get out those 9 remaining hostages, that is probably going to be enough for Benjamin Netanyahu to not rejoin the fight. I have to guess, though, that right now, based on the statements that we've seen from Hamas, they're not interested in working with the Israelis or with the Trump administration or with any of the negotiators in Doha, for that matter, for the release of these hostages. They're saying that they will not be pushed around, they will not be cowed. And so that really bodes poorly, I think, for a happy ending to this. I think we're very likely to see a return to conflict. I would note, though, that the statements that we're seeing coming out of the White House right now, unequivocal demands for the release of the hostages, calling Hamas pure evil, which is what we saw from Secretary of State Marco Rubio in a tweet earlier today. These are the sorts of things that I think, had they been said early on in this conflict, back in October, after Hamas initially took those 254 hostages, this is the kind of thing that I think would have put pressure on Hamas back then. We're now at a point where they've gone far down the road. I would say maybe one other thing to note. I mean, it's too far down the road for them to turn back, I think. They don't have a lot of off-ramps. But I think they're also probably at Hamas, they're a bit concerned that the remaining hostages that would be released will look emaciated. They will look abused, like the 3 that we just saw released last week. This is not going to do much to burnish Hamas's image on the world stage. And so I think they see some grave danger in following through with the release of these hostages, just given how the world is very likely to react.
Now, Jonathan, aside from the industrial military complex, how do these global events impact financial markets around the world?
Well, I mean, what we're seeing right now, for example, is a return of Donald Trump's maximum pressure campaign on the Islamic Republic of Iran. That has tanked the Islamic Republic's currency to record lows. I think you're seeing a bit of a panic on the part of the Chinese and the Russians, wondering whether Iranian oil is going to be able to continue to flow. There is the upside, though, I think, when we look at macroeconomics. There is, I think, a greater chance right now that the Trump administration is going to look to neutralize the Houthis, who are the terror group that's been operating out of Yemen, they have all but shut down the Red Sea corridor for maritime shipping. That may be open sometime soon. And so I think the world would cheer that. But overall, I think what we're seeing is generally positive responses to Donald Trump's policies thus far. Not entirely, obviously, not when it comes to some of the tariffs and some of the great power competition issues that have crept in. But in terms of foreign policy in the Middle East, a tougher policy on Iran and all of its terror proxies generally means better things for the region. And I think we've seen the markets respond in that way.
Jonathan Schanzer, thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.